I'm joined today by my colleague, Justine Vasutis, who I'll get to introduce herself in a moment, who's the head of our education and engagement team here at the Commission. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which I'm coming to you from today, and that is the land of the Bunurong people from the Kulin Nations, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and also acknowledge the recent establishment just yesterday, in fact, of the Yunwarrick Justice Commission, which will look at the experiences of First Nations people here in Victoria as a way of trying to move forward on the necessary journey of reconciliation. So happy International Women's Day week for those of you who are joining us today. It feels somewhat oxymoronic to say that, but I do think it is a time that we reflect on, not so much on I think a time to reflect on where we're at and how much still needs to be done to ensure that women are fully able to participate in every part of life, whether that's economic, social or cultural. And our session today will focus on a few aspects of that, in particular around flexible work and sexual harassment. And the session today is really designed to be very interactive and very practical. So it is not so much a broad sort of ranging discussion, but more an inquiry into some of the resources that we have developed at the Commission over the last couple of years, which are designed to equip employees and employers with practical advice about how they can make their workplaces more inclusive. And we are at a particular moment in time as we build back or build differently towards what a COVID-19 normal workplace or environment looks like, where we can actually make some long awaited structural and systemic changes as to how our workplaces operate. So some of the equalities, some of the tools that we have developed over the past couple of years and tools which we'll be looking at today include our guideline on sexual harassment, a flexible work request planner, which is a digital tool, a sexual harassment support and response tool, and 6 standards for workplaces on sexual harassment. I remarked earlier that we've been told that we're at a really critical turning point around some of the conversations about inclusive and fair workplaces and safe workplaces. But we know that that turning point will actually only turn if we all take up, I suppose, the challenges and that we know exist, but also draw on the many resources that have been developed to actually help employees and employers navigate this space. So as I mentioned, I'm joined by my colleague, Justine, and Justine, I will hand over to you to introduce yourself. But before I do, just remind people that this session is being recorded and it'll be available on our website, so that if you are interested, you can watch it again, or you can encourage your friends or colleagues to watch it. And we also have a live captioner with us. So if you're having trouble accessing the captioner, you can just let us know in the chat and we'll make sure that we fix that problem. So Justine, over to you.
Thank you so much, Kristen. Hi, everybody. It's really lovely to join you today. I'm Justine Vasutis. As Kristen said, I'm the Head of Education and Engagement here at the Commission. And I'd also like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which I am on. Today, I'm very happy to be back in the office. It's day 1 for me, so it's really topical for me to be joining Kristen in this conversation about flexible work and transitioning back into the workplace and how that can be really constructive and positive. And I'm just delighted to see 2 of my colleagues in person in our inquiry team. So if you hear any wonderful background noise, that's them busily providing critical information information and advice to people in Victoria seeking information about their rights. I'd like to pay my respects to Elders past, present and emerging, and to all First Nations people who are joining us today. Okay, Kristen, I know that we've got a series of questions and it's very conversational. So why don't you kick us off with the first question or concerns around flexible work that people are putting to us?
Thanks, Justine. So, and by way of background, at the Commission, we've been aware that access to flexible work has been an issue for both men and women for many years. And we actually developed through a program called Raise It, a series of workshops and also tools that helped people navigate flexible work. And Justine's going to talk a little bit more about that. But COVID was also a proof of concept, if you like, that if you have the right technology, flexible work can work. So people can work from home or they can work remotely. And there were a lot of benefits to that we saw, but we have also heard that over the last 12 months, people have been under much more pressure than they previously had. And that's been particularly the case for women. We did a survey of 1,500 Victorians who told us about this, that women have disproportionately borne the burden of caring responsibilities and also trying to work. People have felt like they have been on 24/7, so that there's been really no respite or division between work and home life, and that people are unsure about how to manage this going forward, even though they want to retain perhaps the flexibility of working from home. But the current rate of work or the pressure of work at the moment is unsustainable. So Justine, just reflecting on, when we developed the flexible work chatbot, it was really to encourage people to work more flexibly. But what have we also learnt about what works and what doesn't?
Great question, Kristen, and great background and context too. So I guess a starting point is even though COVID has, as you say, been a proof of concept, what hasn't changed is that everyone does need to work in a safe way. And that flexible work and flexible working arrangements and working from home doesn't mean that everyone now has to be on 24/7. That's not a safe or healthy working environment or work context. So it's more important than ever, really, for employees and managers and employers to be having constructive and healthy conversations about working hours so that everybody knows, firstly, what their rights are, and everyone has access to a safe working environment, and that importantly, employers and managers know how to take care of their workforce with this incredibly disrupted working environment that we're all finding ourselves in. So a discussion between an employee and a manager can take into account everybody's perspectives. It can absolutely be win-win. And those conversations really do need to cover the laws that apply when it comes to requesting and reviewing requests for flexible work. So as Kristen said, some of the resources and tools that we've developed, including out of our landmark Raise It program, are digital, and they're designed for people to be able to use them on their phones, on tablets, on personal devices that are away from the workplace, which is where they're going to start having conversations with their friends and family about flexible work and what's going to work for them. So we might bring up some screenshots now of our flexible work planner. Thank you, Lauren, our able driver. Here you can see just a snapshot of our flexible work request planner, which is a chatbot, and it's designed to help people walk through a pathway and a conversation to help them plan for a flexible work request. So it's also designed to help a person conduct an informed negotiation with a manager. We know lots of managers are very supportive and have embraced flexible work and are really committed to taking care of their staff and making sure that people are safe. But we also know lots of managers either don't have the information or don't know what their obligations are when responding to a request for flexible work. And it's really important that they do, because some of those obligations are lawful. It's actually law, they have to lawfully consider a flexible request. And this chatbot helps both managers and employees do exactly that. So it's interactive, and as I said, it's got dedicated pathways for employees or for managers who have received a request for flexible work and now need to consider whether or not they can approve it or support it, and maintain productivity and meet business needs. So, Kristen, what we might do is maybe talk through some of the specific questions and concerns that we've heard through our inquiries and education and complaints and all of the evidence and research, to see how this tool can assist people more specifically.
And one of the questions that we often hear or concerns, Justine, is how to manage burnout. And I think that's been particularly topical over the last 12 months. So people want to know, how do I prevent a really high workload and long working hours that are tipping into burnout? And, I remember that as a manager, I was often told, do not send emails to your staff after a particular time. And it feels like a lot of those lessons perhaps fell by the wayside during COVID because we were working such irregular hours. So, how do you create, I suppose, different working arrangements that suit people to help them prevent burnout in a way that's actually financially viable for them and perhaps for the organisation that they're working with, and that won't reduce their income?
Yeah. And this is again really particularly topical now, given that we've just been through this period of time where lots of people have worked from home. And as you say, Kristen, it's been a slippery slope, hasn't it? Where those mechanisms that people have had in place to make sure that people are working sustainably and managers are respecting work-life balance, it's been difficult to maintain those during COVID because people have had to juggle all kinds of things and they're working at different hours, which means managers are too, and lots of those kind of boundaries have gone out the window. But they're really important, and actually transitioning back into the workplace is a really pivotal time to think about that and rethink flexible work. And a trial period is really critical because what might have worked before COVID, that might need to be very, very different now. And one thing, as you say, it's important to reiterate that COVID was a proof of concept. It really debunked so many myths about flexible work. We know that people can work flexibly and work from home and maintain productivity more than they did, or more than people might have considered or interpreted previously. So there's a real opportunity to capitalise on that and not lose it. And interestingly enough, people talked about that in surveys last year. So surveys run across the Victorian public sector showed that the top reasons for decreased well-being alongside managing competing priorities were increased workloads and time pressures. So those mechanisms and those parameters that were lost actually reduced people's well-being. So that's a real safety issue. And 1 in 4 respondents to those Victorian public sector surveys reported high to severe stress in the survey when Victoria was in stage 4 lockdowns. So employers still have obligations as far as possible to provide a safe workplace, and a trial period going back into the workplace or transitioning or adapting to the new COVID normal is a great way to do that. Um, and again, our digital planner, that our chatbot, helps people to plan those conversations, but think about different flexible work options. And we'll get to them in a bit, but really also thinking about a combination of flexible working arrangements. So a trial can be used as a template for what works best moving forward. Our chatbot encourages people to think about communication strategies that are going to work. How can people stay in touch with their team? That doesn't need to be complicated. It can be a really, really easy check-in via Teams or Zoom or all of those platforms we're now working off. And that maintains productivity and output, which is what's most important rather than when and where someone is working often. Critically, a trial also helps a manager and an employee learn by doing. So people can really, a trial is the most effective way to understand what flexible working arrangements, whether it's adjusted hours, whether it's a condensed week, whether it's working from home some days or working in the office all of the time in different ways. An employer and a employee can use a trial to figure out what works best and then use that as a template for the future and for going forward. And that can be used across teams as well. So, uh,
And one
you
of
know,
the things that we have heard, Justine, through our work with Victoria Police and with other organisations as well, and it was a point that Fiona Vines, who's the head of global head of diversity, at BHP made, is that it's really important to collect data about the types of flexible work requests you are receiving and how those requests are responded to by managers, because what we have noticed is that sometimes whether or not your flexible work arrangement works is at the sort of at your manager's discretion. And so ensuring that there's consistency across the workplace in terms of how requests are dealt with, and understanding that flexible work, the acceptance or the refusal of it is not a performance management tool, I think is really critical as well.
Absolutely. And also when people, the importance of collecting data about flexible work and how common it is demonstrates that it isn't and it doesn't have an impact on productivity. And as you said, Kristen, we know from all of our work that workplaces aren't very good at collecting that data. Lots of those arrangements are informal, they work for people, but if that data is collected, it demonstrates, as formal studies have shown, that actually flexibility increases productivity. It doesn't impinge it. Um, so, Kristen, I think too, one of the critical issues that people faced last year was really the juggle between parent and care responsibilities and working, particularly during lockdown. I know you and many of the people here today with us felt that palpably. What were some of the issues that people reported to us?
So some of the things that people reported were, and it was interesting because we noticed that the reporting of these issues changed over time. I think when people first went into lockdown, for some, there was actually a real benefit. For those who could work from home, who had the technology to do it and who weren't in an essential service delivery role, which meant that they had to attend a place of work, there were benefits, I think, to changing the time that you spent commuting or being able to be more present at home. The fact that you could actually connect with a broader group of people across different platforms than you would have normally been able to do. But I think the combination of quite long periods of lockdown, and Victoria had some of the most prolonged and stringent lockdowns across anywhere in the world, and the combination of school closures and at times childcare closures as well meant that working parents in particular were really affected, and the studies have shown that women disproportionately so affected by trying to manage still a full working load and to care, not just care, but actually school children in many cases. And we heard during that period that not all employers were as amenable or understanding as perhaps we thought they might be in terms of flexible working arrangements. So we had people being denied leave. We had, unrealistic expectations that employers had of employees. And I think employees faced with economic insecurity about potentially losing their job if they made a complaint, really worried about the ramifications about speaking out. So we certainly heard from people doing extraordinary things, getting up at 3 a.m. to do a couple of hours of work before children needed to be taken care of. So that is not what we're talking about when we're talking about safe, flexible work practices, Justine. So how have we responded to some of those issues that we've heard about?
Yeah, and I'll talk in a little bit about how our tool can help you. But I think it's important for people to know, as you said, Kristen, those things that we heard about what people were experiencing in the workplace, that managers weren't accommodating, that people were finding it really, really difficult to manage that juggle. That's supported by national data. So, there's statistics from the Australian Bureau of Statistics on unpaid work that show even in December 2020, women were twice as likely as men to have spent 20 or more hours in the previous week on caring for and supervising children, and that's on top of still trying to meet their work commitments. So, it really gives that ABS data really gives a palpable indication and illustration of what people are trying to manage, and that the burden really did fall to women. Staff reported in wellbeing surveys that they felt less healthy, and that they were really really struggling to juggle those competing priorities. And we ourselves ran a survey, as you mentioned, Kristen. And again, it focused on parents and carers and those living with a disability in Victoria, that found more than 3 in 4 working parents in Victoria spent time caring for their children during COVID-19, particularly primary school children. So the pandemic was complex, we know that, but it doesn't change the fact that some workers have particular protections underneath the law, underneath the Equal Opportunity Act, to work flexibly. That has not changed, and we want people to know about their rights and how to request a lawful, flexible working arrangement, and for managers to respond to that. We also know, and through our survey, that 28% of women who didn't put in a flexible work request did so. The reason they didn't is because they were unsure of their own rights. And that's a really important piece of information that can feel complex to get your head around. But our chatbot does that. It talks through the legal protections that people have. And we might bring up a slide here that shows the options that the chatbot walks people through in making a request. So you can see there that it might be varied start times or finish times. It might be a compressed week because they've got carer responsibilities on a particular day of the week, or they're balancing that with a partner or another guardian, or supports available. It could be job sharing to accommodate all of those parent and caring responsibility. So there's really a range of options available to people that they should be putting to managers, because they've got a lawful right to do so. And it could be a combination of any one of those things. And again, capitalising on the fact that COVID-19 has debunked the myths around flexibility not supporting productivity, there's a real opportunity to do that. One of the
Justine, just thinking about what the EOA does say, um, can employers refuse a flexible work request?
They can refuse a flexible work request, but they have to provide the criteria and the basis for doing so, and they have to respond to that. So there's, underneath the Fair Work Act, they've got to respond to a flexible work request within 21 days. But underneath the Equal Opportunity, they must provide a reason for refusing a request, and it must be a reasonable request. And that is for anyone who has a protected attribute, as you said, Kristen. So a parent, a carer, a person with a disability, anyone who's got a lawful right to request a flexible work request. It can't just be no. That's unacceptable. That's unlawful, actually. It's unlawful. And that's what the chatbot helps people to understand, both managers and employees. And again, there's a little snapshot there of a downloadable checklist that managers and employees can access at the end of their pathway through that chatbot. So it's a takeaway that helps them prepare for a conversation. So in addition to finding more ways to work flexibly, understanding rights, understanding lawful obligations, understanding the law, and that applies to everybody, I think there are still some long-standing issues around inconsistencies in the way flexible work is applied, and perhaps uneducated or uninformed managers um, c- uh, still having the perception that it's a personal decision or a personal preference for them to
And
make.
Justine, just before we get on to that, certainly we know that men are more likely to have requests for flexible work refused. They're also less likely to ask for flexible work. So often when we talk about flexible work, we talk about it as a women's issue, but it's a both gender or all genders issue in terms of, this is not just about parenting responsibilities. It could be someone who is living with a disability who needs more flexibility with their work, or someone who is caring for somebody else, or someone who wants to pursue interests outside work. So I think it's really important that we broaden the conversation and around it. Certainly women are more impacted, but broaden it and destigmatise around people asking for flexible work as well. The other thing that you mentioned was that there's inconsistencies around how flexible work requests are managed, and also from some organisations, depending on the type of organisation that it is. And I think it's fair to say that some environments may be trickier than others to conceive of flexible work in the first instance. But when we often go in and talk to organisations, or sectors, many of them will say, well, it's all very well if you're an office worker and you can just work from home, but our organisation, you cannot work flexibly. And so that's sometimes the first response from a lot of organisations who have quite, historical and rigid ways of working. And again, we've sort of seen some of that debunked over the last 12 months, but we have to be very careful that that stigma doesn't just reintroduce itself, I suppose, into the new ways of working. So I might get you to respond to that, Justine, but I'll also just remind people that they can, if you have questions for Justine or for myself about any of the things that we're talking about, or how the chatbots work, then please feel free to just put it in the chat. But Justine, over to you.
Thanks, Kristen. It's such a good point that many workplaces still feel that they're unique in that, the way they operate and their business needs are unique. And of course, there are many businesses and workplaces that can't accommodate flexible work because of the nature of their work. But again, do think that COVID it tested the boundaries of that and enabled us to discover that there was certainly more latitude than we might have thought. So within the commission, even, we had real concerns about how we were going to maintain our inquiry service, which is a frontline delivery service. We've got our phones set up in our platforms and our systems here. People are responding to people from the public who walk into the office and want to speak to someone. We really didn't know prior to COVID if it was possible to make that service flexible or enable people to work remotely. And it turns out, through necessity, we could, and it worked incredibly effectively. And the team worked incredibly effectively together. They had those communication strategies set up. We just adapted. And I think workplaces underestimate how much they can adapt. And again, it's about going to the resources that are available, including our chatbot and those checklists, and encouraging more constructive conversations about what flexible work is available. So we've talked about how I think what's really important is providing some assistance to managers to to have those conversations and apply them more consistently and actually think outside the box a little bit more. And they've got to do that, but they need help to do that. So we've actually got a video here. We'll try to show you an interactive a video which shows you exactly how our tool works for managers. So you can see here that the chatbot is talking, it's prompting a manager to think about a trial of a period of months. But also if they refuse a request, they've got to provide grounds. And the chatbot is interpreting what the manager has selected, and preparing some prompts to help them structure a conversation with their employee. So there's some guidance there about a manager taking a screenshot of the talking points to start that preparation, adding some links below to further resources, to our checklist, to COVID-19 issues in planning, learning about rights and obligations at the work, and contacting the Commission if they want more information or if they need to make a complaint of any sort. And also to external resources and agencies that we work very closely with, like the Fair Work Ombudsman, to make sure that people have really good information about how to support flexible work, not only for people who require it, or have a right to it under law, but to anyone. You don't need to have a lawful right to request a flexible work arrangement, and managers need to consider that carefully. Lots of benefits to it, maintaining business continuity, staff, loyalty, values, all of those things that come with a two-way dialogue between employers and employees about fundamental things like work-life balance and flexible work arrangements that support them to do that. And our chatbot makes it really easy for people to do that. So they don't have to come up with that on their own. It's really quick and you can use it personally, and it's confidential and it's anonymous. Okay, so I think we might have one more discussion point around flexible work. And again, I think it's another long-standing one, Kristen, around whether or not flexible work prevents productivity, and whether or not it is or isn't sustainable. So what are some of the questions that you've heard in your
Yeah,
discussions?
I think it's a really interesting topic, because I remember when we were looking at flexible work within Victoria Police, and the access to flexible work was a real impediment both to professional development and progression. So working flexibly there generally meant working part-time, and often it would be part-time where you have young children. And then the assumption was, well, when your children are at school age, you'll go back to working full-time hours like everybody else. And I think we do now, I think, have the possibility to reimagine that flexible work isn't just because you might need to work different hours for a period in your life. It's actually a whole new way of working. And the benefits, and there's been a lot of research that's been done around this, the benefits to being able to diversify your workplace by actually embedding different ways, different work practices within the organisation are immense, and that is linked to flexible work. The ability to get more women into the workplace because of having different work arrangements and different work practices is that is a genuine issue where you don't have access to flexible work, and what that means for women entering those sorts of jobs. And I think the other thing that we have seen, and it's been picked up here in the Q&A, is some of those stereotypes that still exist around, well, you can work flexibly at a certain level, but when you become a senior person, that's not necessarily at CEO level, that's at manager level, you need to be there all of the time. So flexible work is okay for some cohorts within the organisation, but it's when when your job perhaps becomes, there is more responsibility attached to your job, then it's just not an option. And I can say from personal experience that is, I found that to completely not be the case. And I think really what we need to see, though, is a demonstration from quite senior people in positions, CEO positions, CFO positions, where they take up flexible work as well. So one of the things that we've seen, Justine, as people are returning to work, is that we've seen men returning at a faster rate than women. And that is often because women are still balancing parenting responsibilities, or perhaps have found that the flexibility allows them to do things that they weren't able to do when they were commuting to and from work. And while there are tremendous benefits to that, I think the flip side to that is that you are not as seen or visible in the physical workplace as if you are in the virtual workplace. And so they're the informal and the formal opportunities that are perhaps sort of given out, and the informal professional development that you might receive when you're not actually in the physical workplace, means that people might miss out on those opportunities if they're working from home, in the way that we have over the last 12 months. And to counter against that, my view is that you really, really need senior people in the organisation to be stepping up and to be role modelling this. There's no reason that if your employee works from home a couple of days a week, that you can't be working from home a couple of days a week. And it really requires, I think, a demonstration of how senior people are going to take up flexibility. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're working less. It doesn't mean that you're any less productive. And if we're working to outcomes rather than to hours in the office, then it should be completely achievable. But I really believe that sends an unusual message if the leaders of the organisation, if the executives of the organisation are all in the office from 7 o'clock until 7 a.m. from 9 at night, but are encouraging their staff to work flexibly.
So, Kristen, everything you say about culture is critical. And really, we're at a point in time, aren't we, where it's no longer acceptable to think about a flexible work arrangement as an individual request, as opposed to the culture of a workplace, the values and the culture of a workplace to enable everybody to meet their true potential, to provide equal opportunity, as you say, equal opportunity to those conversations about career progression, to networking, to professional development, to all of those really critical things that enable people to reach their full potential. And for too long, it has been flexible work and part-time work, and containing that has actually impacted women and disadvantaged women. There was a really great article, very short read, in The Conversation just yesterday, actually, by a couple of articles. I will try not to murder their names, but Leah Rapania and Geordie Meeks, about how important it is that flexibility for women alone is not enough to support and enable their career progression. It must be accessed and used by men as well, because that means that parent and caring responsibilities are equitable. That means that flexible work is normalised in the workplace, that everyone is having the same conversations in the same ways, working in the same way, that actually the culture and the conversations around flexible work stop being about rigid start and finish times and places of work, and really start becoming more constructively about output and productivity. And at its heart, flexible work is about working smarter, not working less, not working more, but working smarter to get the job done. Kristen, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, because as a really important leader and a human rights and equality leader in Victoria, your role modelling of flexible work and work practices in general have absolutely cultivated a culture in this workplace. And I can say that because I came from a workplace where flexible work or working from home was actually quite difficult to access. There was a concern that it meant that people weren't working or weren't on. And coming to the Commission with you as a leader and role modelling that was really, really critical. So I wanted to just ask you to reflect a bit on that, about your transition, having experienced that personally, where it was difficult, and what you've seen at the Commission as a result of your role modelling as a leader.
That does put me on the spot, Justine. What I will say is that I have always been absolutely committed. I have 3 school-age children now, but I have worked full-time when they've all been young, like many people out there. And I was absolutely adamant that my work aspirations, which was, like many people, is a strong part of who I am and my identity, did not have to necessarily be um, dismantled because I was also a parent. And saying that, there are particular periods, when your children are very young, where you may need to pull back, and you may need to arrange work in a way that absolutely works for you and your family. So I don't think people should be judged on the individual choices they make about working full-time or working part-time or taking long periods from the workforce to play the caring role that they want to play. But I was very determined to make sure that people saw that I did what I could to manage, working full time and creating a workplace that where people were able to sort of thrive in a working environment and feel like they were supported to take care of the responsibilities outside of work as well. Because I knew that that was what was going to be best actually for the organisation. If people felt valued as a whole person, not just as a worker, then they were going to be able to contribute more. And I think that is a culture that we have created at the organisation. The other thing I think that we have done is that we have trusted employees. So again, I've used the sort of proof of concept idea, but it has not been my experience that flexible work or the lack of access to flexible work will improve someone's performance whatsoever. So my experience has been, if you give people the autonomy and the choice and the, within the parameters of what they need to do, within the parameters of the requirements of the job, if you give them the choice to work out what is best for them and how they can do their job in a way that suits them and the people that perhaps they manage best, then you are going to have the most productive and the most engaged workforce. And that just seems like an absolute no-brainer to me. So it is always curious when I go into organizations or I hear from people where there has just been kind of a blanket refusal to contemplating arrangements which might be slightly out of the ordinary, because we are, at the end of the day, we are all people who have complex lives. And I think we've been trying to fit into a very rigid way of working for far too long, and that has had a particularly detrimental impact on women. But I also think it's had an impact on men and the types of roles that people go for and the types of contributions that they might be able to make to family life outside of their working life. And I think we have reimagined what that looks like in the Commission. And I know that other big organisations, complex organisations, have also been able to reimagine that. But I do think it is about having trust and belief in your employees and working towards outcomes, as I say, rather than working just towards hours.
Thanks, Kristen, and thank you for accommodating my request for a personal response there. I really did put you on the spot.
No, not at all.
But yes, trust and confidence are critical. And, the culture, a workplace culture doesn't finish in the workplace. It is about people's lives beyond that. And workplaces are a reflection of society. So that trust and confidence and equitable access is so important. And what we do know well and truly is that now that people have worked flexibly, they're going to want to continue to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So, employers and managers who still are reticent, they actually are going to have to get on board, because people know that it works and they're going to start making those requests. So, we've walked through some of the great resources and tools that are available to everyone right now. There's checklists, there's downloads, there's guides, there's a whole range of things that are really designed to make it very, very easy for people to know their obligations and have those constructive conversations. But the trust and the confidence and the cultural piece, people have really got to work on that. It's no longer about an individual request. It's actually about how, as a workplace, people come together and work.
And Justine, we can see some of the resources there on the screen. I'm just conscious we don't have a lot of time left. And one of the other topics that we were keen to cover today was, and it's been, it's been something that the Commission has been working in for a long time, but it's been brought into very sort of sharp relief in the last few weeks as well, and that is the issue of safety at work, and in particular sexual harassment and assault at work. We know so much, about the impacts of sexual harassment at work. We know so much about just how harmful it is, not just in that moment, but the long tail of trauma that is often involved in those sorts of incidents. And we know how sexual harassment can not just affect someone in a particular moment, but also how it can discourage them from actually continuing to participate in the workforce. It can lead to people giving up their jobs because they can't get the behaviour to stop. It can leave people feeling sidelined. We know that people who speak up about sexual harassment are often victimised. We know that workplaces still don't have good enough preventative and responsive systems in place. And we know that many people still feel really uncomfortable about reporting sexual harassment. Some of the things that we hear, Justine, are, well, I can't make a complaint about that because that would be career suicide for me, or the perpetrator is just so powerful that the organisation will get behind him. I am a dispensable worker, if you like. No one will take my complaint seriously. There'll be ramifications for me if I speak up. We still hear these sorts of things every day from across every different industry. And, we're seeing this being played out nationally now in the most terrible way. And it does strike me that if we had better organisational prevention mechanisms and better response mechanisms, actually people wouldn't have to go through the media necessarily, which is pretty traumatic for someone to have to endure. And there would be we would hope that this didn't happen in the first place, but there would be better organisational responses if it did happen. Can you tell us a bit, Justine, about some of the work that we have been doing in this space in the last couple of years, in particular, perhaps starting with our sexual harassment guidelines?
Yeah, absolutely, Kristen. And the, the time that we're in now and recent events, and really the last 2 or 3 years, as you said, where we're starting to just peel back the layers and see what people are really experiencing and the full impact of sexual harassment in the workplace. I think that tells us that actually workplaces are on notice now. It's no longer enough to not know what to do. It's no longer acceptable to try to sweep it under the carpet, under the guise that that's somehow better for everybody. Actually, workplaces are now on notice to meet their lawful obligations. And in Victoria, that includes the positive duty. So that's not actually just addressing or responding to sexual harassment as it happens. Workplaces are on notice to put in place mechanisms to prevent it from happening, and now is the time to do it. So our sexual harassment guidelines are practice guidelines. We've got a function underneath legislation. This is really helpful for employers and managers in particular who are listening, but employees as well. We want you to promote this and know about it. So these practice guidelines are really important because they can be used in a range of ways to determine whether or not a workplace has met its lawful obligations, whether it is meeting its positive duty underneath the Equal Opportunity Act. In particular, I might talk a little bit about the 6 minimum standards in our sexual harassment guideline, which are up there for you now. And this is what we know from all of our research, all of our review work, all of our education, our complaints and our inquiries, all of that really rich evidence base. We know that these 6 minimum standards are critical to ensuring that an employer meets its positive duty and prevents as well as eliminates and addresses sexual harassment. So there's knowledge, understanding obligations underneath the Equal Opportunity Act, putting together a prevention plan, organisational capability. So driving a culture of respect and trust. And that's everything from a really victim-centric complaints mechanism and encouraging people and supporting people to talk up, to actually those fundamental things about ensuring that you have a gender equitable workplace where everyone has access to flexible work, where, gender discrimination and bias and sexist comments are not tolerated. Risk management, so a review of culture and respect regularly so an organisation knows what its people are experiencing, reporting and response and monitoring and evaluating how effective their framework is. So our policy and our research branch have pulled these guidelines together. They've been out for almost 10 months now. We know that workplaces are using them. We get feedback on these all the time. And one of the most helpful aspects of the guidelines is that they are designed for workplaces of all shapes and sizes. They're not a one size fits all. We've got examples in the guidelines that are designed to help small businesses who think that they won't be able to do anything actually apply these standards in their context to really large organisations who are well versed in their lawful obligations, ensure that they're meeting their minimum requirements.
I think that's a very good point, Justine, because under the Equal Opportunity Act, there are perhaps different standards, if you like, or the different ways of meeting those minimum obligations, depending on whether you're a large, well-resourced organisation to whether you're a small organisation. And that doesn't mean that you all don't have the same obligation to keep your staff safe and ensure that you're preventing and responding to sexual harassment. But the actions that you might take, depending on the size and complexity of your workforce, might look quite different. And within the guidelines are intended to be really, really practical, because we kept hearing from people, okay, well, we need a equal opportunity plan, or we need a sexual harassment plan. We don't know what that looks like. We don't know what actions we need to take to make sure we are preventing and responding appropriately to sexual harassment. So the intention was to give a sense of exactly what sexual harassment is and the impact of sexual harassment, but also to give very practical examples of what employers could do to make sure that they are preventing and responding appropriately. And the feedback that we've had is that they're really, really usable and really, really practical. One of the questions that has come through in the chat, Justine, is about how some of our resources fit with the requirements under the new Gender Equality Act in Victoria. And I might get you to speak to some of that, but what I can say generally is that we work very closely with the Gender Equality Commission and ensure that the resources that we're putting together will also help you respond to your requirements, your obligations as an employer under the Gender Equality Act. But Justine, are there other things that you wanted to mention about that?
Yeah, thanks, Kristen. All of the guidelines and the tools that we've discussed today, absolutely workplaces should be applying them, not only to meet their obligations underneath the Equal Opportunity Act, regardless of shape or size, but also their obligations underneath the Gender Equality Act, because they are synonymous. As you say, if you can demonstrate that you've got a good flexible work policy and you've educated your people and you're giving them resources to access flexible work, you're meeting those lawful obligations. And that's the same with sexual harassment. Those criteria are in there. The other thing that is really important in the Gender Equality Act is this notion of intersectionality. And the Equal Opportunity Act is really at the heart of that. The 19 attributes that we well know we're not a single attribute. We're not just a gender. We're not just a parent or a carer. We're not just someone with a disability. We're a range of those attributes That's what's known as intersectionality, and that's really critical to ensuring or employers understanding intersectionality and how it impacts someone's access to equal opportunity is important to both of those pieces of legislation, and it's written into the Gender Equality Act. So all of these resources take that into account and help employers understand how to support people regardless of their circumstances. Um, uh, Another tool I'm just going to go to very quickly. I think we've got about a minute to show it, and it is in terms of sexual harassment, or it does help workplaces manage sexual harassment, and it is our sexual harassment chatbot. So this is just a quick screenshot, and we're encouraging people to jump online and actually try these tools, use these tools. We'll have the links up in a minute or so for people to use. But I'll just let people know that, again, this is designed to be a tool that can be used very, very privately and personally, because we know that this is when people have those conversations with friends and family members. But there are different pathways. So you can use it if you've seen something, if you're a bystander or a witness and you've seen something or overheard something that you think is of a sexual nature, but you don't know, and the chatbot will tell you whether or not that is sexual harassment. You can use it if something has happened to you and you want to know if you have experienced sexual harassment and what to do next. Where can you get help? How can you talk to somebody about it? Or if you're a manager or a colleague and someone has disclosed this to you, because that's often the stumbling block. You know, people don't know what to do with that information, and this actually helps people take the next step and support someone who has experienced sexual harassment. And that supports workplaces to respond appropriately and in a really supportive and constructive way to sexual harassment. Okay, so again, I'll leave it there. Back to you, Chris.
No, I just think it's such a good point, and I know, I've had lots of calls from people and emails over the last couple of weeks about how the public discussion around sexual harassment and sexual assault has re-traumatized people, and has made them recall and want to act on things that have happened to them in the workplace. They might have been quite recent or they might have been historical. And it's possible that people listening to today's session have also experienced something like that or know someone who's experienced something like that. And so I wanted to really, I suppose, end today's session by letting you know that still one of the things that we hear about is people's lack of confidence and trust in their organisation's complaint or reporting systems. And that is why we think that it's critical that there are independent avenues for reporting and making complaints or raising issues around sexual harassment. So it is a reminder to all of you that we are here and that we can take those reports and that we can provide you with information about something that perhaps has happened to you or perhaps has happened to someone that you work with. And that is also what these chatbots and resources are designed to do. And I think, the more what we've seen, I suppose, is the more awareness, the greater, I suppose, the overall push for structural and systemic change. But there are still individuals experiencing this every day, and this is what some of those resources are designed to assist with. Someone has asked whether or not we'll make these slides available. They're on that we can put them on our website, but all of the resources that you've seen here as well, you'll see the slide up there now. These are also on our website, and we'd really welcome feedback about how useful those tools have been for you to be able to access, because we're trying to improve them and respond to them all of the time. I am conscious that we're pretty much at 2 o'clock, Justine. So on behalf of both of us, I wanted to thank everybody for joining us here today, and for sort of engaging through the chat and asking questions. Please feel free to reach out post this session. Justine, thank you and your team for putting all of the resources together today. And can I end by reminding everybody that, again, the Commission is here. There are resources available. There are other organisations that are also there, such as WorkSafe, to support you around some of these issues. In terms of, someone said, where do you want us to send feedback? Justine, what is the best place to send feedback?
That is a great question. The best place to send feedback to us is either if you go to our website, we've got an education email inbox and we've got an inquiries inbox. If you send an email with feedback to either of those, they'll make it directly to me and to Lauren Matthews, who is our manager of education and manages a very able team of great consultants.
Thank you. And we've also put up a little survey, which we really encourage people to fill out, because that helps us tailor these education sessions, more broadly, and make sure that you're getting the information that is going to be useful to you. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Happy International Women's Day week, and I look forward to seeing you at future commission sessions. Thanks very much.